Well, hello everyone. We are back again for another Other Ink Thursday. This is Matthew Orr from Wet Ink Games, and I have called up Adam Vass of I'm sorry, is it I didn't ask you before. Is it
Yes,
Adam Vass or Adam Voss?
Vass, correct.
Vass. Adam, I got it in one. Of World Champ Game Co. And Adam, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going all right. Going all right. I so the primary reason that I called you up is because I played Sunless Seas. Is that what Sunless Seas? Is that what
Sleepless.
it's called? I always want to call it Shoreless Skies, which I think is something else. Anyway, so
Sleepless Seas.
Sleepless Seas, right? Because it's insomnia. I can never remember the name of it, but it was such a. I think I saw it advertised on like. Maybe it wasn't even a sponsored ad. Maybe it wasn't even advertised. Maybe it was just
Yeah,
on Instagram. But you were like, "Hey, I made the solo game. It's got this map," and I'm like, "You're playing a insomniac fisher person, and it's like $2 on itch or whatever." And I'm like,
right.
"Great, I like all of check those checks all a bunch of boxes for me." So I played it, and there's so much in the game. Like last year, 2023 was my big year of solo games. I'd never played one before, but I wanted to try them out, and so I played a bunch of them last year, and yours was one of them. And but yours has such a unusual combination. It has, like I said, all the things: the map, the like NPCs, the you're a fisher fishing, so you're got like a hold where you can put fish in. Like there's like a resource management aspect to it. There's a lot that's happening, and it's like 3 pages long. It's like it's
Yeah.
very. So I just want to please explain yourself. Basically, is my question. Like,
Oh,
what made you want to try and pack so much into such a small package, and like where did the idea come from? And yeah, and add some details because I've hit
yeah.
on the high notes, but like
Um,
what is the game?
I'm flattered because it's a game that truthfully was I don't want to say not important, but it was more of like a thought exercise. I'm not a big
Mm,
solo gamer myself, and I also was sort of just dipping my toes last year. Um, I ended up playing like two or three, like not a deep dive, just because, as we'll talk about over the course of this, just I'm doing a lot of stuff. But
sure.
Sleepless Seas was I was in Europe on a tour, and I was playing Dredge by Black Salt Games on my Switch, which is effectively the same conceit of like a eldritch fishing game. And it was a game that I've also never really played fishing games. I've been vegan for 15 years, and not that we are the characters, but that's nothing that's ever really appealed to me. And I had heard good things about this game. I tried it out. I found myself thinking about it when I wasn't playing it, which is generally my indicator that there's something here
Mm,
worth thinking about and investigating further. And yeah, I really just kind of took that, diluted it, and wanted to make this mini zine. This was a game that was built on constraints in that it was limited. Like I wanted to do a one page zine, or like the one piece of paper 8 page mini
hmm.
zine,
Yeah.
stuffed inside of an origami envelope, which then if you got the print edition, the envelope unfolds into the fishing map, and it is kind of this cool. There's a feeling to unfolding a map, versus just having the whole thing out. Especially I printed these at home, so the toner will wipe off and it will age in the creases and kind of just add to the feeling of like I found this thing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I really dug this game. I really was. It felt like a successful experiment
Mm,
in what is a solo game for me as someone who really enjoys story game and creative input, and also um, having some kind of forward momentum that I keep playing, because I find with like a journaling game, I tend to forget or tap out, and I never really finish them, even the ones that I'm super interested in, just because journaling and writing in that way is not part of my like habit.
mm,
So Sleepless Seas is a game that you can play in a relatively short amount of time, but has enough that you get to sort of project your own interests and biases onto and make it your own thing. And I think that's kind of my special sauce as a game designer, is giving you some compelling stuff to think about and work with, and also letting you take it in the context that you want to take it in.
Yeah, I think that is oh, you were talking about like what works as a solo game for you, and I am a big journaler, so like I like to have enough, like I like to have enough to journal about without being told everything, and
Yeah,
like that's the balance point for me. So I think Sleepless Seas really it gave you, it gave it, I mean it's so small, it's almost like I wanted a little bit more, it it was a very evocative setting with like the map unfolds and you've got the descriptions about like there are ruins of some ancient civilization here, and so you can, the shoals are actually buildings or whatever, and you're like, okay, well there's a whole bunch of, that's it. I mean it's just this little
right,
note on the map, and so you get to invent like what was the ancient civilization, how long has it been gone, is this, are we in the future, and this is a like water world situation, and this is New York that you're fishing above,
right.
like none of that is in the game. You get to decide all of that as you encounter each of these prompts. So it's like it 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 hit that balance for me as far as like enough that is this game, but also tons of space for me to put in whatever I wanted. And yeah, so I think it's really great as far as that goes. And then you talked about the momentum, and the other thing that I really enjoyed about it was it doesn't go on and on and on. There's like you're tracking the days of the lunar cycle, and
Right.
so you're going to be doing this for about a month, and then you called it an Eldritch game, so you can kind of guess what happens at the end if you haven't played it yet.
Yeah.
But that's it. I mean, it's a set number of time, and you're going to be playing for that long, and that's how long it's going to take you to reach the end of the game, and whatever that story means for you based on some of the choices. But
I think that's also a response to both my solo game experience and also my just campaign game experience. It's a very privileged few who get to see their campaigns end in a
mm,
satisfying way, and a seemingly vast majority who sees our campaigns fizzle or die from scheduling or anything like that. And so I really like having end states in role playing games and setting that expectation of saying like this game takes 1 hour or 12 turns or whatever that thing is, and still leaving the ending uh open-ended enough to suit your narrative and your situation, but to give the game itself kind of a soft timeline to set
right.
expectation and to make sure you as a player see that you're 75% of the way through. It's time to kind of like ramp up some of the events and the action and make sure that you have that satisfying ending.
Yeah, yeah, it is sort of a, I talked to, well, I didn't talk, well, I did talk a little bit about it, but there was a I think it was on Dice Breakers, there was like a best games of the year thing. They did several of those year end things, but
Mm-hmm.
one of them was like best game I played this year, and not all of them, but many of them were like one shots, like
Yeah,
and not like they played only one issue of like the One Ring or whatever. They were like, they're like these, like the Quiet Year, and I'm thinking of the home game was mentioned, that Doug Lewandowski and Julian Yunsu Julian Kim did. It's like a haunted house. It's like in a box, and you do one night, and that's the end of the game, and you resolve it in
yeah,
the morning. And there is no campaign play on any of these games. Whereas like so many games you could do a one shot, but they're kind of intended to be campaign play. So
for sure.
anyway, that was the article. Was a lot of, I just noticed that a lot of these people had offered up these one shot experiences as their best game experience of the year, guess best game played. And so I was like, there is sort of like a more, so what I wanted to talk about coming out of that article with some people was like, is that sort of like, it makes sense, right? Because people are going to play one shots. They're easier to schedule a one shot than it is to
Mm-hmm.
schedule an 18 session game over the course of 2 months or whatever, or not 2 months, 2 years. Um, but also like you can design a game like you just said with the when you get to 75%, that's when stuff really ramps up. You know, you can put that in the
Yeah.
game and then you make an experience that you couldn't design an experience to be that intense if you knew it was going to take 2 years. You know, it
Hmm.
would. So I don't know. Is it like a maybe it's a trend, I guess, in the industry right now of these
I
one
think
shots in
so.
ascendancy.
I think the
Um,
trend more so is in play culture than design culture, and then there's sort of
mm,
that cyclical nature of designers reacting and then creating, and then it sort of, feeds itself. But I like to compare it just to like a good movie that takes
yeah,
2 hours instead of a TV show which takes 3 months, and like they both can feel good, they both have payoffs, but a movie is immediate satisfaction and you have all the context. And then even thinking about movies that are trilogies or like series, and you have to wait 2 years to get the next installment or whatever, like that's most people's D&D game is that really delayed gratification.
yeah, that's a good. I mean, I was thinking movies too with that designing a short, intense experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good example. And you said 3 months, TV shows 3 months. Like my brain is like, no, no, it's like 9 months from like, but you're right. This is all
Yeah.
TV is shorter now than it used to be, you know,
Right.
with
And then there's obviously like binge releasing and streaming and stuff. But I'm thinking back when Breaking Bad was on air and the sort of cultural zeitgeist of watching it every Sunday, like sort of feeling, which is really awesome. And um not something that I've ever seen super tapped into in a role playing sense, in that sort of like um something compelling happens every session, but there's this meta narrative that really is what you're here for. Really, really hard to pull off. You need some really committed players and really
I mean, that's
strong infrastructure for the design.
well, right. I mean, what occurs to me is the Adventurers League. I have a buddy that he used to do Adventurers League, and like he gets the new content right from WotC, and then he's got to prep and takes it to the local shop, and then in theory, globally, people are having these events
Right.
happen in their games, because it's all like you said, there's the infrastructure to support that kind of, um, you know,
Yeah, because I don't know. I was about to say I don't know if it's possible, and I don't want to say that, but I would love to see what an indie sphere take on such a like cultural play community could be
yeah.
like.
I I,
Um,
I
I
have
don't
a
know. It's
yeah, I know a friend that he used to have a war game, and the idea was, I mean, he never got enough players to really make it happen, but he was doing like a war game as an indie company, and so he would do like tournaments at conventions, and it's like whoever wins this tournament, that's the gang who won in the fiction, and like it was he was trying it, but I think it did not become as popular as Games Workshop's products.
sure.
So you know, it's yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's been attempts certainly. I
Right.
um well, if there's anything do you want to? I mean, we could probably keep talking about the game a little bit, but is there anything in particular that you want to say about some Sleepless Seas before we move on to some of your other? Because I want to know more about how you got to the point that you made a game in the first place, and I've
Sure.
been looking back at like you're not new. This isn't like your first game that you've done. You've
Right.
been doing games for a while, so we should talk about some of that other stuff. But
Yeah. For better or worse, don't have. I think Sleepless Seas, because it is so self-contained, doesn't have a lot that the game doesn't already say. Um,
yeah, yeah,
but
it's
I, like you said, I have plenty of stuff to talk about, and but just as like a summary, I think it's really cool that people played this, because there's a thing in indie RPG culture of just kind of like making stuff and hoping. It's rare. It's rarer to get play feedback, and this game for some reason I got more than normal, and so that was really
mm,
nice. And it's the digital is pay what you want, so if people want to check it out, it's on my itch, and that would be rad. I did a really small print edition, as I mentioned, that I like made at home and folded by hand and did all that, and but those are long gone, so
yeah.
the digital is the way that game will live on.
Did did your itch page have the link to the video about how to fold the page, or did I see that somewhere
It
else?
should. So it's
Okay,
not yeah, it is on the itch page. Yeah.
okay. Because I got a couple. I encountered a different zine that was also folded that way, and I was like, I already know how to do this, but I don't know which of the two I did first. So that's why I was asking if it was your page that had the, you print it out and you fold it
Right.
and make
Because I
one
want
cut, and then you fold it some more, and there it
mhm.
is. It's a little booklet. I
And I'm a
have it
little
somewhere.
pedantic in that like I don't like to read digital files and like stare at the computer. I like to print out everything. Um all the like digital stuff I buy on itch, I just will print out a booklet and read it on the couch. Um so I wanted to make sure that that was like an accessible thing for people to be able to print and make it a zine instead of it's it's not the most interesting PDF, I guess.
Sure. Well, yeah, it takes all kinds. I mean, there is sort of like, I don't know, that's a whole other thing. Like I see you've got the fancy Morkborg record there in the background
Yeah.
of your thing. So and obviously when I did meet you briefly at PAX Unplugged, and you had a whole booth with a whole pile of stuff, and it's not just like hand folded stuff. I mean,
Right.
you're also a person who makes products. So I mean, obviously, my business partner calls that dead tree format. It's his preferred thing to have everything in dead tree format. You won't
Me
run into
too, for sure.
filing compatibilities. But like, is that I don't know. I guess what I'm thinking of is like, is that sort of like aesthetic or a preference or whatever? Like, does it come from any particular place, or are you thinking about that? I mean, because obviously digital is such an important part of the indie space, because people will buy, like, I have more PDFs on my computer than I have books on my shelf. Some
Sure.
stuff I'm like, well, you know 15 for the PDF to back this instead of 40 for the hardcover is it's where I'm gonna that game, that's all the support I have for this game today, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But then there is sort of like, it is so much more fun to have the products, but it's also so much more work on you as the publisher. Or I don't know, they just, I guess, talk about that, like, preference for the physical stuff. Like, is it just about the reading experience, or is there more to it with
Um, it definitely comes from like growing up in punk and hardcore and collecting records and having a tangible thing. Um, there's also just like I um I moved around a lot, but when I was between like 18 and 23, 24, so I couldn't have like stuff. I for a while I had like one Tupperware bin full of clothes and one full of records. And then whenever I moved, that was like all I could bring and take with me because I was just like transient.
yeah,
And so once I started living in place where I could have my own things and like collect, I do like these are all full of game books and zines and as you can see like have breached the shelves into the top area and so that's always been important for me as someone who ingests and collects these things is that I want the real thing. um I, as a publisher, only really care about print media and physical media. Um, a lot of the time, projects like Sleepless Seas even are designed around physical constraints of saying, I want it to be this size or I want it to be this format. Um, I've done games in all different kind of print. Like I did a game on a face mask when the first year of lockdown. I did a game on scratcher tickets that I still have, like that I sell at conventions and stuff. Um, they were designed for that format. They were not just games that I've stuck on another kind of print. And
yeah,
obviously, the sort of half letter perfect bound or hardcover book is our sort of industry standard. But I have like, I love to play with that physical format and the limitations that the cycle between like, um, this has to be a certain number of pages. So you design the game around that, or this has to be a risograph zine is only two colors, so you have to design everything around that. Like having that impulse, having that restraint is what drives a lot of my creativity. So I really like physical first in that way.
Yeah.
And I recognize the utility of digital and PDFs and everything, but it doesn't compel me or interest me at all as a designer or as a consumer.
Hmm.
I yeah, I really I'm biting my tongue because my impulse is to say I don't care about them.
Well, you already
And
said that, so like that's the first thing you said. So,
it's not
but I mean, I mean,
it's not for
it's
me.
fine.
That's, I guess,
It's
the
fine.
better way to put
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Is like I personally don't want them, and I think they serve a function in the industry and the scene, especially for people who can't hold inventory or don't have the upfront cost to print stuff. But to me, a PDF is not real and a book is real. And like my
mm,
ability to interact with it in meat space is what makes something a real thing instead of a idea or a theory.
yeah. It's like, and then I guess it's sort of like the question is like, is the game the object or is the game the activity that the object
Right.
directs you to do? That's I mean, I'm a I don't mind a PDF myself, but uh mostly that's a constraint of like I've designated a certain amount of shelf space for my
Yeah.
collection, and other than that, it's got to be digital, or I just don't have room for it. But that's I mean, those are choices that I made, right? Like I do love
Sure.
the when you have a book and you've got the tactile nature, and something like we started this talking about solo games. So like I've got the nice printed version of Thousand Year Old Vampire, which has like these fake old library stickers on it, so it looks like it's been in various people's collections over time, and it's got like
Yeah.
textured spine, like it's not really leather bound, but it's got like
Right.
it's been printed, manufactured in a way that it invokes a feeling of an old book, even though it's obviously newly printed, because it's pre-distressed in some ways,
Right.
and there's such a talk about designing for that, right? Like designing those layers of the files or whatever to make the object look that way is, I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
something that if I ever talk to Tim Hutchins, I'll want to talk to him about. But uh I don't know, like so what where have you really sorry, where have you really leveraged that? Because again, I saw your booth at PAX Unplugged, and you've got like books of different sizes and stuff like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
you've got one it's like extreme landscape or something like that. It's like the one it's your
Oh yeah.
you were telling me about
According,
the
I have a
uh,
game. A few. I have a few like weird format games. Um, One that I think you're thinking of is called Aether Operations. It was uh a game I did a couple years ago that was sort of weird. Uh, Say like all of reality is composed of soul and meat and bone and uh brain, and each of those are like
it's four
distinct
good stats.
dimensions. Each of those are distinct dimensions that kind of exist in parallel, so you're traveling between them and like exploring and cleansing relics and doing cool fantasy hop psychedelia stuff. But in print the game is this big, it's 4 by 5 or something, and then each spread folds and this they double in size. So like the cover's 4 by 5, then the next page is 5 by 9, then the next one is 9 by 10, until you have this like 17 by 23 broadsheet that is a map of the realms and the like sort of adventure guide. Um,
That
and
is
so
not
that
what I
was
was thinking of, but that's incredible. I
oh,
love that.
I don't have it within arm's reach, or else I'd show you, but it's um a very cool thing. And like
Yeah.
each of the 4 realms has its own distinct visual language. So I was all of the meat lands were being painted by hand, and all of bone was collage art, and like they have their own kind of distinct voices visually. So representing that in the art led to bigger and bigger pieces of art. So it ends up being this massive broadsheet poster. I also
That's
have another game, sorry, called Forever Horse, that was an accordion fold. So it's like you see the front of the horse on the front page. It looks like a brochure, but it folds out I think 24 inches wide.
Yeah.
Um, and there's rules on each panel, but the torso of the horse goes all the way around the whole thing in this sort of Ouroboros.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
that's another. I also missed that at your booth. I did not spend very. I should have spent more time. It was the last day. I was busy.
oh, I understand.
But that so these designs sound wild, right? They're very far from like, oh, it's a. I do a lot of 6x9 books, and they're like page one, page two, page three,
Yeah, right.
and but these sound obviously you're playing with the medium in a lot, and you mentioned like punk and hardcore, and then like the zine ends up folding out into a poster, and so like is that real analog sort of feeling is I think it goes all the way back for you, I guess.
Yeah.
If you have two possessions, one is a box of clothes and one is a box of records,
I
like the
mean,
that analog appreciation of the analog is very it's who you are, right? Like at this
it was
point.
such a moment for me to get a record, especially when if I like pre-ordered a band that I like had a new record. It would come in the mail. I'd put the disc on and I'd open the gatefold or the booklet and read the lyrics along with the record while it was playing for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably I maybe didn't realize at the time was probably very formative for me in terms of
Mm.
like I'm interacting with the art that is the sound, the actual songs, and I'm also interacting with the physical product of the record itself, the jacket and the lyric book and everything else, and marrying those two in my mind. Maybe like you mentioned earlier, is the game, the experience, is it the book? It's like it's all of these things,
Yeah.
and to me, I need every facet or aspect of those to be in tandem in some way. Like I don't want the GM to read the book on their own time and the players to never like interact with it or see it. I
Mm.
want the whole thing to be harmonious.
Yeah.
So having print format, having innovative formats as part of play experience, and just sort of managing expectation, because I think that's a big thing that I do as world champ in general is like I'm not making the elf adventure game, like I'm making pretty weird stuff pretty full
Yeah,
time.
about Meat Realm, and it folds
Yeah.
out to a poster. Yeah, it's so how do you, I mean, what is that? I guess to bring it back to design a little bit, like how do you design for like I guess what comes first, right? You're like, is it like I want that if what you're on some level trying to recapture is that experience of like reading the opening the record and reading it and like so the horse aurobus game with an
Yeah.
accordion fold thing, like are you trying to capture a particular feel and that ended up being the horse thing, or if you're just like I bet I could manufacture something that was folded a bunch of ways and then what would be the fun thing to put on top of that. I mean I'm sure it's different for different projects, but like what
Yeah.
comes first, the idea or
It's
the
a it's
game
a
or
chicken
the
and egg.
feeling? Yeah.
I think a lot of the so I would say a good portion of the time, maybe a third of the time. And I will say also this is limited to the games that I make that aren't the half letter hardcover, because I think I mean I'm working on one now. I have a couple that I really love, but um that's like taken for granted format for me of like if I'm going to design an 80-page game, it's probably going to be that half letter hardcover because it's like a gold standard.
Mm-hmm.
But these more experimental projects, I will say maybe a third of the time I start with the format and I say I want to make, like with Forever Horse, the accordion fold zine that goes a couple feet wide. I mean, it's sort of that feeling of like tugging on a string and having it just be more. Or with scratchers, um, I would always get scratch off lottery tickets in my Christmas stocking, and the act of scratching it and that sort of moment of anticipation, it was what I was trying to gamify more than the actual like text underneath, because most scratcher lotto tickets don't win anything, but
Sure.
you still have that moment where it's really exciting. And so I have a game called Scratch and Claw that's sort of like mutant anthro Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles plus drugs and alcohol, that
So
every
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
every postcard, 4x6 or whatever, has a scratch off area, and that's your whole character build. So it tells you what species you are, what your skills are, because they're asymmetrical skills, and everyone has randomly generated 3 of them. What items you start with, what your goals are, what you're afraid of, and there's like a quintillion player options because of the data that was put into these scratchers.
So you
So
just that's your character sheet is you don't know what your character is until you decide to scratch off some stuff and
yeah,
then okay.
and then the
That's
game rules, the common rules that everyone abides by, are on the back of the card. So those are static. But the idea of like doing a sort of OSR mutant crawl where it's sort of high lethality, that moment of death, character death, doesn't sting as bad because you get to scratch a new card. You get
mm,
to like learn more about the world through the characters, and you get that exciting moment of scratching a ticket. Like that's just a
yeah.
cool physical thing to interact with the game itself. Um, and then on like some other far end of production schedule, I guess, or production spectrum, I do have a few like boxed games, role playing games that are kind of emulating or evocative of board game feel and mechanics. One within arm's reach, I have. Uh, this is my newest game, 1978.
Yeah.
It's a 2-player slasher horror, so one player is the killer and the other is their intended victim. But yeah, it comes in a box with 2 rule books. Like each player has their own rules. They are symmetrical, but they're unique. Like that way you don't have to pass the rule back and forth. Like it's a
Right.
utility, but it's also just like a cool thing. And then we have screen printed like board mat that you play on with
Nice.
this big ass spooky house, and also like shows you where you put the cards,
Yeah, yeah.
and you track your resources and everything. And then it comes with like the cards that you play with and some tiny little knives that you use to track your resources. So like it feels like a board game. It's going to be familiar with people who are interested in that stuff, but it's a
Right.
story game. It's a two
Yeah.
player sort of competitive role playing experience. So like that bridge is really cool to me. That idea of having familiar feelings for people who are interested in but less familiar with role playing or storytelling.
Right.
Um, but this was also like there's just something to the feel of playing on a board, placing stuff on it. Um, that I think we all, I mean, even as indie RPG designers, like we still grew up playing Sorry and like
Right.
whatever, like uh
Yeah, definitely played a lot of Risk, and
yeah.
that's little guys on a map. Like, have
And
I
there
have I seen Risk re-implemented as a role-playing game? I don't think so. But like, there's got to be room for
but
that,
it
right? A
could.
dudes on
Yeah,
a
yeah.
map RPG.
I really love that, and it comes back to that tangibility, like
Yeah,
the way that we interact with the game. Making it physical and making it immersive in that way is really engaging to me. And I think you can do that with the print format. You can do that with the way it's played. Um, I will admit that a lot of my digital iterations of these games are suffering because of that, but that's not what they're for. I'm not
right.
making 78 has a digital option, but it's like that's
It's
a
like
facsimile of the game.
it would have to be like a print and play kind of option, right?
Print
Or
and play is definitely what I went for. Um, because I also as RPG designers and publishers, we're doing a million different jobs, and
sure.
I've kind of drawn the line in the sand that says like I'm great at doing print design and physical stuff. I'm not going to learn coding and programming and how to do tabletop simulator and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a different skill set for
I just
sure.
had to sorry, my partner's calling me.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, tell us where people can find your games on the internet. Like to order them, not to play them on the like to get the real
Yeah.
physical products. Where can they do that?
My website is worldchamp.io. Um, there are links to my itch for people who want to dip their toes digitally, but that's also where my web store is, where you can order everything in print, and I just ship everything out myself.
Nice.
IPR does carry a couple of my games. and Exalted Funeral and Floating Chair and Ratty and Contatti, like the sort of gold
Yeah,
web
yeah,
retailers. They
yeah.
have some of my stuff, but for a lot of the smaller press weird things like Forever Horse and Aether Operations, like those are generally things I don't distribute, so they are at my website alongside the tentpole stuff like 1978 and my hardcover books, which we didn't even tap into, but I have plenty
Yeah.
of those as well. So worldchamp.io is my hub.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Sorry you had to run, but we can we'll be on the internet. We'll see you again.
Yes,
Thank you.
awesome. Thank you.